Welcome to Moonlit Romantic, your place for soothing love stories to carry you into restful dreams. Tonight's story is Sailing Into You. Olivia Bennett has always preferred the comfort of her small-town bookshop, safe, steady, and full of pages that never change their course. But when her best friend gifts her 2 weeks aboard a sailing course in the Greek islands, Olivia finds herself stepping into a world of turquoise waters, sunlit decks, and Captain Theo Markos, a man who lives for horizons and believes every tide carries a promise. On quiet coves and beneath starlit skies, Olivia will learn that sometimes the bravest journey is not to cross an ocean, but to open your heart. So breathe deep, let the waves carry you, and let the story begin. Chapter 1: Anchors and Goodbyes. Olivia Bennett had always thought of mornings as a kind of binding. The ribbon of routine tied her gently to the day. Kettle on, bell above the bookshop door, tested with a soft tap. Shades rolled halfway so the street could look in without feeling obliged to come inside. In the corner, the old radio offered a station that did not change songs too quickly, and she felt the town breathe with her, slow, measurable, familiar. Willowbridge was a place of handwritten receipts and first-name greetings, of pies that ran out before noon on Saturdays, and a florist who slipped sprigs of rosemary into every bouquet as if blessing the day. "Do not tidy the window," Olivia called to no one in particular, because some habits were charms. "You look perfect just as you are." The window did look perfect. 3 weather-softened sailing memoirs leaned inside a brass bookend in the shape of a gull, and beside them sat a stout novel with a blue-green cover that had sold exactly never and refused to be discouraged. Seashells offered their spirals. A little card read, "Summer is a page you can turn slowly." People smiled when they read it, and that was enough. The bell chimed. Mia came in on a tumble of lemon perfume and impractical sandals, sunglasses perched on her hair like a promise of scandal. "Liv," she sang. "Tell me you are free tonight." "I am free tonight," Olivia said, because this was a truth most nights. She liked being free the way a book likes to wait for the right reader, patiently, without apology. "Good, because I have a present for you, and you are going to pretend not to hate it until after dessert." Olivia's brows climbed. "You could give me a teapot shaped like a hedgehog, and I would not hate it. If it pours, I love it." Mia snapped open a jaunty canvas tote and set an envelope on the counter as if delivering a summons. The envelope was heavy, the way important things are. Olivia slid a thumb beneath the flap and pulled out a printed voucher and a photograph. The voucher declared in cheerful type 2-week sailing course through the Greek islands, departure in early June, berth reserved for one Olivia Bennett, all lessons included. The photograph showed a white-hulled sailboat slicing a strip of blue, so bright it made her eyes water. She blinked. "Mia." "It is not a prank," Mia said quickly, as if that were the first objection to clear. "Your aunt called me a hero, and I have accepted the title. You need a holiday that is not rearranging the cookbook section. Olivia set the photograph down carefully as if the sea might slosh. I do not even swim particularly well. You float, Mia countered. You once floated for a very long time in that lake when we were 10 and convinced yourself you had discovered a new form of meditation. I swallowed a leaf, Olivia said. I coughed for 20 minutes. Mia leaned on the counter, chin in hand, eyes soft. Liv, you have not left this county in years. You talk to books like friends, and to the kettle like a therapist. You deserve wind and sunlight that has not met the windows of this shop. You deserve a horizon. The words landed gently, because Mia knew how to throw them that way. Olivia looked around at her small kingdom, shelves of paperbacks, whose spines she could identify by touch, a ladder that squeaked during the third rung, no matter how much she oiled it, the plants that drooped, only when she fretted over them. She thought of the way she had set down roots so quietly that sometimes she could not hear them growing. How does one take a sailing course? She asked, stalling by pretending to plan. Does one wear shoes? Apparently, one wears boat shoes. And an expression of mild competence, Mia said. You already have the second, the first we can purchase. I am not an adventurer, Olivia murmured. I am a person who alphabetizes. Mia reached across the counter and squeezed her hand. You are a person who reads stories about people who think they are not adventurers until they are. What would you tell one of them? I would tell them to remember extra sunscreen and take the paperbacks they do not mind ruining. And to go, Olivia admitted, the word small and surprising, and immediately followed by a flutter in her chest that was not dread. But Mia, 2 weeks. What about the shop? I have arranged for your aunt and 3 volunteers who owe you favors to cover, Mia said, producing a list with names and days and the kind of redundancies that made Olivia's heart feel less skittish. Also, Mrs. Patel from the bakery will bring cinnamon buns on Saturdays to bribe customers into being kind. Olivia laughed, then covered her mouth, startled by the sound. You did all this? You once drove me to the airport at 4 a.m. and did not complain, even when my suitcase shed glitter into your trunk. Consider this payback. Also consider that you are allowed to be a person in motion. Olivia looked at the photograph again. The boat seemed to be laughing. Beyond it, a line of white houses climbed a hill, blue doors like punctuation marks. Her pulse made a small decision all by itself. I will go, she said, before she could think of good reasons to unsay it. I will hate it until I do not. Mia whooped, then clapped a hand over her mouth because a pair of devoted customers in the corner were squinting at a crossword anthology as if they might sue for peace and quiet. We will celebrate tonight, she whispered. 7 at the taverna. Wear something that allows for baklava. Everything I own allows for baklava, Olivia assured her. It is a design principle. When Mia left, the shop's familiar hush returned, but it felt different now, stitched with a new thread. Olivia walked the aisles, like a person checking on sleeping children. She chose paperbacks that could forgive salt and travel and set them aside. a slim volume of Greek myths with a sly narrator, a romance where the sea did not behave, but love learned to, a memoir that smelled faintly of tobacco and tide pools because of the paper. She tapped the bell a second time and listened to it ring, thinking of its echo on water. Customers came and went, leaving behind the small intimacy of conversation. By late afternoon, the sun turned the dust in the air to gold commas, and Olivia wrote the day's tally in the ledger with the old fountain pen that sometimes spattered when she was sentimental. 2 copies of the Bird Book for Mrs. Dawson, 1 poetry pamphlet to the teenage boy who pretends he does not read poems, 1 atlas to the woman who needed proof that anywhere else exists. She smiled, then frowned at her own reflection in the window. Anywhere else existed. She had just said yes to it. Packing took place that evening with the solemnity of a ceremony and the chaos of a sleepover. Mia arrived with a suitcase that seemed to multiply outfits upon request. "You need linen," she declared. "You need a hat that suggests you like lemons. You need sandals that will betray you at the worst possible moment." "I need ginger tablets," Olivia said, holding up a small box as if it were a passport. "I have heard that the sea disrespects stomachs." "The sea will respect you," Mia said, then softened. "But take the tablets anyway." They ate too much at the taverna, grilled halloumi that squeaked, tomatoes that tasted like the sun remembered them, a plate of tiny fish that looked at Olivia with reproach until Mia covered them with lemon slices. They toasted with something clear and alarming, and then with tea, because calamity, the night before a flight, was a cliché. Neither of them intended to perform. Later, in bed with the window open to a humming summer night, Olivia lay awake and listened to the town's small noises. A car door closing, a train far away, a fox arguing with the hedge. She imagined the boat's deck under her feet, the swing and settle, the way the wind would decide, and she would follow. Fear and excitement braided themselves into something that did not have a word yet. She let it be. Morning arrived with suitcase wheels grumbling down the path, and Mia's voice being brave at the curb. "Send me pictures of the sea," Mia said, hugging her with bones and perfume and conviction. "Send me pictures of your face in a place that scares you and delights you. And if you meet a handsome sailor, send me pictures of his forearms." "Mia," Olivia laughed, scandalized, and relieved to be scandalized. "I am going to learn knots." "You can learn many kinds of knots," Mia said solemnly. "Goodbye, Liv. Come back with freckles." The train to the airport moved like a sentence that did not waste words. Olivia watched the fields give way to warehouses and then to runways. Flying had always seemed to her like agreeing to be a thought for a while instead of a body. She read the myths on the plane and skipped the parts where hubris fell into the sea. She slept a little, woke to a cloud that looked exactly like a sheep, and smiled at it, because some miracles should be greeted. Athens unfurled beneath her like a whitewashed story of hills and light. In the taxi, she saw glimpses of blue in the gaps between buildings, a private joke the sea was telling the city. When the driver set her down near the marina, the smell of salt and diesel and sun-heated rope rushed up to meet her. Masts made a forest of lines, against an afternoon sky. The sailing school's office was a box of shade and clipped efficiency. A woman with a striped scarf checked Olivia's name, stamped something official, and pointed her toward the dock with the kind of kindness that expects you to be brave. Olivia walked the planks carefully, suitcase wheels rattling like nervous teeth. Boats nudged against fenders with soft thumps, like large, friendly animals. Then she saw the sloop that would be hers for a while at least. Her name was Eirini Peace, painted in navy across a white hull that looked like it had kept a secret or two. The deck was tidy, everything lashed or nested, sails wrapped like sleeping birds. A man stood near the helm, back to her, speaking to a pair of travelers who nodded too quickly in the way of people eager to be clever. "Hello," Olivia offered, feeling her voice attempt diplomacy with the wind. He turned. Captain Theo Markos looked like the sort of person the sea might have invented to prove a point. Sun had written its memory across his skin. His hair had learned Salt's particular habits. His eyes were a clear, laughing blue, even when his mouth was busy with other concerns. The lines at the corners of those eyes suggested he had smiled at storms and at people in that order. "Olivia Bennett," he said, as if greeting a tide that had arrived exactly when it wanted to. His accent curled like a soft wave around her name. "Welcome to Eirini. I am Theo. Shoes off, please. The boat likes feet." She blinked down at her sensible canvas sneakers as if they might offer to turn themselves into bare toes. "The boat likes feet," she repeated faintly, then kicked off her shoes and stepped onto the deck. It moved. Not much, the gentlest shrug, a reminder that the ground had begun to do new things. She placed one hand on the lifeline, one hand on her suitcase handle, and discovered that balance is not something you think about. It is something you ask. Theo watched her with the kind of attention that did not intrude. "First step is always the strangest," he said. "She is a good boat. She will be patient." "Good," Olivia said, finding the word with relief. "Because I am a slow student on dry land." "We will make a fine pair," he returned. The easy confidence of it nudged something in her chest that had been sitting with its coat on, unsure whether to stay. "We will do introductions in a little while, when everyone has arrived. For now, choose a cabin, stow your bag, and come back up. I have watermelon that tastes like a good decision." She nodded as if agreeing to a treaty. Below deck, the cabin smelled of clean wood and lemon oil. There was a porthole the size of a book's idea of a moon, a narrow bed with blue sheets, and a small shelf where 2 paperbacks could sit and bicker. She set her bag down as if it were capable of seasickness, and then opened it to lay out the talismans. Ginger tablets, sunscreen, floppy hat that suggested lemons without actually containing any. The myths, the romance, the stubborn blue-green novel that had insisted on coming. Her fingers found an old postcard she kept between paperbacks, a picture of a lighthouse scolding a storm. On the back, Mia had once written, "You are allowed to be where you cannot explain yourself." Olivia tucked it into the shelf behind the novels and climbed back up. On deck, the marina hummed with the particular energy of departures, lists being recited, ropes being coiled, a child being convinced that boats do not, in fact, eat hats. Theo had arranged plates on the cockpit table. Watermelon that glowed like a ruby, white cheese with a drizzle of something green, bread that broke with a sigh. 2 other travelers had arrived, a pair of friends from somewhere colder, their shoulders already relaxing into sun. Olivia, Theo said, gesturing her closer. This is Mara and Inez. They are here to learn how to make the boat fly. Mara says she knows knots from climbing. Inez says she likes naps. Naps are an ancient maritime tradition, Olivia said gravely, and Inez brightened. Theo's laughter was easy, uncompetitive with the wind. We are a good crew. We will make mistakes politely and teach each other where the bruises come from. They ate watermelon that dripped down chins and did not mind, cheese that made no apologies for itself, bread that forgave the day for all its unknowns. Theo explained where things were without pointing, his hands as sure as his voice. He spoke of wind angles, as if describing a friend's quirks. He asked about books and meant it. When the sun slid lower and the marina's noise softened to a murmur, he walked them through the first lesson: how to move on deck without surprising yourself, how to coil a line so it does not remember your mistakes, how to ask the boat a question with your weight. Olivia listened with her shoulders as much as her ears. The boat listened back. A breeze arrived with opinions and then reconsidered. Theo watched the water and said, "Tomorrow is gentle. We will leave after breakfast, and you will not be brave because you will not need to be. You will be curious. That is better." Olivia nodded because curiosity she understood. She slid her palm along the warm teak of the combing and felt the grain speak in a language she did not know and already trusted. Night came on steady and benevolent. Strings of lights winked along the dock. A tavern somewhere tried on a song like a sweater. Theo handed them each a small headlamp with elastic that laughed at hair. "For the first night," he said, "you will find the headlamp silly and then essential. You will keep it around your neck and forget it is there until it makes you look like a kindly lighthouse." "I have always wanted to be a kindly lighthouse," Olivia murmured, and he smiled as if she had said something significant. When she lay down in the narrow berth later, the boat's gentle cradle surprised her. Sleep rocked closer with each quiet creak. Through the porthole, she saw one bright star and a smear of lights along the shore. She thought of the shop at home, the bell over the door, the card in the window, promising that summer could be turned slowly. She thought of tomorrow's horizon and felt the careful excitement of a page lifted by a thumb, not yet revealed. The sea sighed. Olivia exhaled to match it. Somewhere above, a footstep moved, measured and light. Theo, making one last round before surrendering the deck to moon and mooring lines. She pictured him there, the steadiness, the smile lines, the way he had said "we," as if it were the most natural resource. The thought did not alarm her. It curled into the dark and warmed it. "Be curious," she whispered to the wooden ribs around her, to herself, to the part of her that had begun to untie a knot she had forgotten she carried. The boat answered with a soft sound that was not words but understood them. And when sleep came, it did not argue. It simply laid itself beside her like a chart, all open water, and the invitation of a route that could be drawn as gently as necessary. Chapter 2. Learning the Wind. The morning came with the sound of gulls squabbling and the faint clink of halyards against masts. a chorus the marina must have sung every dawn for decades. Olivia opened her eyes to a narrow rectangle of sunlight spilling through her porthole. The boat had rocked through the night, gentle as a cradle, and she was surprised to find she had slept almost as deeply as she ever had in her own bed above the bookshop. She stretched carefully, half expecting to feel sore from the unfamiliar berth, but instead there was only a pleasant awareness of muscles used differently. Her hand brushed the little stack of paperbacks on the shelf. She smiled at them, a reassurance that she had not completely abandoned her comforts. When she climbed on deck, barefoot, as Theo had suggested, the air smelled of coffee and the sea's salt breath. Theo was at the cockpit table, setting out mugs and a plate of fruit, his movements unhurried, like a man who understood that rushing spoiled more mornings than it saved. "Good morning, Olivia," he said warmly. "Did the boat treat you kindly?" "She was kinder than I expected," Olivia admitted, lowering herself onto the bench. "I only woke once, and that was when a gull decided the porthole was an audience." Theo laughed, a sound that carried as easily as wind over the water. The gulls consider themselves part of the crew. They demand attention in exchange for weather reports. Soon, Mara and Inez joined them, hair tousled, eyes still heavy with sleep. Together, they shared bread, yogurt drizzled with honey, and slices of peach so sweet Olivia almost closed her eyes with each bite. She was accustomed to cereal hurried at a counter, tea cooling between customers at the shop. Here, breakfast felt like a conversation in itself. When the dishes were cleared and stowed, Theo clapped his hands lightly. "Today we leave the harbor. A gentle breeze is waiting. We will not go far, only enough to feel how the sea holds us." Olivia's stomach fluttered. She had been fine on the dock, fine in the stillness of last night. But the thought of the open sea made her hand twitch toward the little bottle of ginger tablets in her bag. She slipped one into her pocket like a charm. Theo guided them through preparation, checking lines, unzipping sail covers, loosening the halyards that had sung all night. "Every boat has her own ways," he explained, "but Eirini is forgiving. She teaches, not punishes." Mara was quick to volunteer, hauling lines with the strength of her climbing practice. Inez was slower, more tentative, but Theo's steady tone made even hesitation feel useful. Olivia hovered uncertain until he pressed a coiled rope into her hands. "This is the jib sheet," he said. "When I tell you, you will ease it or trim it. Do not worry about the terms yet. Think of it as helping the sail breathe." She frowned at the rope, heavy in her palms. "What if I do it wrong?" "You will," Theo said cheerfully. "That is how we learn. Mistakes are only proof of trying." The words steadied her more than she expected. When all was ready, Theo started the small engine to guide them from the marina. The water shimmered silver with morning light, and the boat moved slowly, past rows of other vessels, their names painted in proud fonts: Calypso, Sea Whisper, Odyssey. People on neighboring boats waved lazily, cups of coffee in hand. Olivia felt like she had stumbled into a neighborhood where the streets were waves and everyone spoke in nods and sails. At the mouth of the harbor, Theo cut the engine. The silence was immediate, profound, broken only by the slap of water against the hull. "Now," he said, voice calm but bright, "let us ask the wind to carry us." He raised the mainsail, the fabric unfurling with a snap that startled Olivia. The boat leaned slightly, as if stretching awake. Mara, ease the halyard. Inés, help Olivia with the jib. Olivia's fingers fumbled with the rope, but Theo's hand was there, guiding hers. Pull steady, he said softly, close enough that she could smell the salt on his skin. The sail wants to fly. Let it. Together, they trimmed the jib, and suddenly the boat shifted. The wind caught, the hull sliced forward, and Olivia gasped as the world tilted beneath her. Breathe, Theo reminded her. The sea moves, you move with it. Do not fight, only follow. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. The water rushed past, the sails bellied full, and the land began to slip behind. Olivia gripped the line tighter, heart pounding, then realized she was not afraid. She was thrilled. Theo watched her, a small smile tugging at his lips. Not so terrible, is it? She shook her head, hair whipping in the wind. It feels like a secret the world forgot to keep. Exactly, he said. For the next hour, Theo guided them gently through the rhythm of sailing. He explained how to read the wind's touch on the water, how to shift weight when the boat heeled, how to tack smoothly. Mara took to it quickly, laughing each time the boom swung. Inés found a spot at the tiller and handled it with surprising grace. Olivia was slower, hesitant, but Theo never hurried her. Each time she fumbled, he offered calm correction, his voice steady as the keel beneath them. Look at the horizon, not the water. Let your body feel balance instead of chasing it. By midday, they reached a small cove where whitewashed houses clung to a hillside. Theo dropped anchor, the chain rattling down with authority. Our first stop, he announced, Agios Niko, a village that believes time is optional. They lowered the dinghy and rowed ashore. Olivia's legs wobbled as they touched land, the ground strangely still beneath her. I feel like the earth is swaying, she admitted. It will pass, Theo assured her. Your body remembers faster than your mind. The village was a painting come alive. Narrow alleys paved with stones polished by centuries. Bougainvillea spilling magenta from balconies. Cats stretched in patches of sun, as if auditioning for worship. They ate lunch at a taverna, shaded by grapevines. Grilled fish that melted under lemon. Bread baked that morning. Olives glossy and sharp. Theo poured them each a small glass of ouzo. A toast, he said, to first sails, first mistakes, and first joys. They clinked glasses, and Olivia sipped cautiously. The anise flavor bloomed strange and sweet on her tongue, the warmth settling in her chest. She felt lighter, looser, as though the sea itself had curled into her. After lunch, they wandered the alleys. Mara bought a woven bracelet from an old woman who insisted it would bring luck. Inés took photographs of every doorway. Olivia found herself lingering at a bookshop, no larger than her own back home, its shelves lined with titles in Greek. She traced the spines, unable to read most of them, but comforted by their presence. Theo appeared at her side. You found your place. She smiled, a little sheepish. I always do. He pulled a slim volume from the shelf and handed it to her. This one is poems, simple Greek, easy even for children. I can teach you a few words. She held it carefully. you would do that. Of course, language is like sailing. You listen, you let it carry you. Back on the boat, the afternoon drifted into a lazy rhythm. Mara napped in the cockpit. Inez sketched the village from the stern, and Olivia sat with Theo near the tiller, the poetry book in her lap. He taught her how to say thalassa, the sea, and a starry star. Her tongue stumbled over the sounds, but he only laughed softly, repeating until she caught them. When evening came, they ate on deck, bread, cheese, fruit, and wine. From a clay jug, Theo produced as if by magic. The horizon burned gold, the sea turning to liquid fire. Olivia leaned back, the gentle sway of the boat beneath her, the warmth of wine in her veins. She looked at Theo, silhouetted against the sunset, and felt something she could not name, a pull, a curiosity, a promise. "You seem at home here," she murmured. "This is home," he said simply. "The sea is always moving, but it always welcomes me back." She looked out at the endless water, then at him. For the first time, she wondered if she could belong here too, not as a traveler, but as someone who allowed herself to be carried. When she finally went below to her cabin, she carried the little poetry book with her. She whispered thalassa into the dark, the word tasting of salt and stars. And when she closed her eyes, the sea rocked her not as a stranger, but as a lullaby. Chapter 3. Horizons. Unfolding. Morning came like a whispered promise, the light arriving on the water before it touched the shore. Olivia woke to the hush-splash cadence against the hull and the faint clatter of someone moving above. For a long breath, she lay still, letting the rhythm ink itself into her. She had expected the sea to be noisy, in a way that demanded attention. She had not expected this tender, repetitive music that seemed to say, "You are carried, you are carried." On deck, Theo stood at the bow with a coil of line in his hands, gaze lifted to the pale seam where sky kissed water. He looked like a note held just long enough to be beautiful. When he turned at the sound of her bare feet, he greeted her as if she had returned from an important voyage, rather than a small, uncomplicated sleep. "Good morning, Olivia," he said. "You slept well?" "I did," she answered, surprised to hear the truth come so easily. "I think the boat and I have agreed to be kind to each other." "An excellent treaty," he replied, looping the line in tidy figure eights. "There is coffee and peaches that forgot how to be shy." Mara and Inez drifted up yawning. Hair slipped on, smiles quick. They leaned against the combing, hands around warm mugs, and watched the village on the hill begin to make its own day, cats stepping across low walls, a man with a broom ushering dust into a new arrangement, a woman beating a rug with finality. Theo told them the plan as if listing ingredients for a beloved stew. "We leave with a first honest breeze. It will be gentle, so we will practice tacking until your arms complain. Then a small lunch while drifting, perhaps a swim, then another hop to a harbor where the sky prefers to perform at sunset." He nodded toward Olivia's pocket with mock solemnity. "Your ginger tablets may remain decorative." She patted the bottle as if applauding it for its restraint. "I will keep it as insurance." When they raised the sails, Olivia felt again that subtle shock of motion, the boat leaning into the wind, like a dancer finding her partner's hand. Theo handed her the tiller and she startled. "Me?" "You," he said. "I will stay beside you, like the sea when the weather is polite." The tiller was warm with sun and the memory of countless hands. He placed his palm lightly over hers for a moment, a quiet calibration, then released her. "Look far," he murmured. "Choose something on the horizon, a cloud, the notch of a distant hill, and keep us walking toward it. The sea has patterns. If you look only at the near water, it feels like chaos. If you look farther, it reveals its grammar." Olivia's instinct wanted to stare at the bow cutting the blue, to watch the water's small arguments. She made herself listen to him instead. The horizon steadied, a line that belonged to everything. After a few wobbles, that Theo allowed to exist without comment, she felt the boat respond to her hands, a conversation that could be understood without words. "This is not so different from shelving," she said after a while, half laughing at herself. "How so?" Theo asked, amused. "You keep the spine where it wants to belong. Not too tight, not too loose. You make an aisle out of desire and habit. You ask things to align for each other's benefit." She flushed, aware she had made an elaborate metaphor out of what was simply steering. But Theo's expression was thoughtful, pleased. "I like that," he said. "The sea as a library of moving shelves." They tacked and tacked again, the boom swinging with a well-mannered thunk each time. Mara and Aeneas trimming sails with growing confidence. Olivia's shoulders warmed. The sting on her nose reminded her of the sun's opinion. Between maneuvers, Theo told small stories, in the tone of a person who believes stories belong to everyone. The time a pod of dolphins escorted Eirini as if she were a guest of honor. The afternoon he had taught a retired baker to tie a bowline using a leftover length of licorice. The night a meteor shower left scorch marks on memory. "Do you ever tire of it?" Olivia asked. "The water, the leaving, the arriving." "The leaving, no," he said, after a moment's consideration. "The arriving only if it is noisy inside my head. There are harbors I love, like family, and harbors I love like the stranger who sits beside you and reminds you people are gentle. But tired?" He shook his head. "Ask me on a winter morning when the wind has opinions about my ears. I might answer differently." They ate lunch while drifting. A lazy flotilla of plates passed hand to hand. Feta with olive oil that tasted like green light, tomatoes cut in moons, bread that required attention when torn. Theo cut peaches and passed the quarters around, juice running joyfully to wrists. Inez declared she wanted to marry the sea. Mara said she would rather send it in postcards from dry land. Olivia licked honey from her thumb and wondered if there were vows that could be written in tides. "Swim?" Theo offered, gesturing to the latter. Olivia glanced over the rail, where the water waited in 1,000 patient shades of blue. The thought of stepping into that much depth made something small inside her draw back. "Perhaps later," she said, not out of shame but out of honesty. "Later is a generous word," Theo said softly, making of it a gift rather than an evasion. He and Mara slid into the sea with ease, their heads bright coins, briefly before they became strokes and laughter. Inez dangled her feet and narrated their splashes with enthusiastic exaggeration. Olivia sat with the poetry book open on her knees and tried the new words on her tongue while the boat made shadows beneath her. In the afternoon, they sailed again, the wind lazy but present, the sea answering in kind. A drowsiness came over the boat, the kind that asks for quiet rather than sleep. Theo showed Olivia how to read the water for cat's paws. Those dark ripples that mean a breeze is on its way. She pointed and felt absurdly proud when the promise arrived and filled the sails like a sigh. Near late light, they slipped into a harbor tucked between twin headlands. White houses stacked themselves up a hill as if racing to see the view first. A chapel sat near the top, like a punctuation mark. Theo guided Eirini toward a quay, where other boats were already settled. Sterns neatly aligned, bows bobbing like agreeable dogs. "We will med more," he said. "Stern to the dock, gentle reverse. Someone will pass a line ashore and pretend it is a test. We will pretend we studied." "I did not study," Olivia whispered. "You have been studying all day," he murmured back. "Stand by the stern line with dignity. That is 80%. There was a small flurry as they prepared. Mara coiled lines until they looked like sculptures. Inez fended off with a boat hook, face set at in comic determination. Olivia stood with the stern line and attempted to embody dignity. Theo backed the boat with a practiced ease that required more attention than he allowed it to show. A harborside man took their line and made a show of competence. Theo smiled in the international language of thank you for your theater. Then there was the bowline to the mooring and a few adjustments to keep Eirini perfectly parallel to her neighbors. And they were, suddenly, home for the evening. They wandered ashore, as a group, and then, by unspoken consent, scattered. Mara went seeking a hill to run up and then down. Inez found the nearest cats and began a diplomatic mission. Olivia drifted along the waterfront, reading menus, reading faces, reading the way the sea made a moving mirror for the town. She stopped at a tiny kiosk that sold maps no one needed and bought one anyway. "Keep the sea in your pocket," the woman said as she handed it over. "Yes," Olivia said, "because sometimes one-word answers are the correct ones." She climbed a narrow stair street that seemed to have been designed by whim. Bougainvillea spilled from balconies in joyous floods. When she reached the small chapel, she sat on the low wall and let her breath catch up. The view was the sort one keeps as a second heartbeat. Masts like strokes of ink against the deepening sky, roofs preparing to glow, water practicing its evening faces. Below, Eirini tugged lightly at her lines, wanting to remember she could move. "Beautiful, yes." Theo's voice came out of the blue, like an old friend. He sat on the wall beside her, 2 steps away, careful with space, the way he was careful with sail. "It is," she said. "It looks like a story knows itself." "That is why the islands keep their shape," he replied. "They are held up by 1,000 stories, each aware of the others. Do you ever get tired of explaining things so beautifully?" she teased, grateful he made it easy to be light when her chest was full. He laughed. "Only when people pretend they are not listening." They ate at a taverna, where the tables wobbled and no one minded. The owner brought plates without being asked and told them what they were after the first bite. Octopus, charred and tender. Zucchini fritters that made Olive clap her hands once without meaning to. Potatoes roasted until their edges flirted with crispness. Theo ordered a carafe of wine, the color of sunsets, and poured without ceremony. As the street dimmed and the lights strung overhead took up their small, brave duty, the conversation skated from things that made sense. How sails prefer certain breezes to things that did not need to. Inez asked what everyone was afraid of, and then immediately apologized for the question. Theo said fear is a compass that often points to the thing you care about most. Mara announced she feared wasting days on things she did not love. Olivia felt that sentence settle in her, like a pebble that would become a place to stand. Later, when they walked back along the quay, a woman playing a mandolin sang a song that moved like a tide through the listening bodies. Theo hummed along under his breath, without the arrogance of someone who knows all the words. At the edge of the dock, he steadied the passerelle with one hand and offered the other to Olivia. "Thank you," she said when she had crossed, the words larger than the step. "You are welcome," he answered, and she wondered if his hand was always that warm, or if the sea had taught it something. They sat on deck instead of going below, because the night had opinions, and asked to be heard. The air was soft, threaded with salt, and the faintest ghost of grilled fish. Around them, other boats made the low, familiar noises of evening. Murmurs, laughter, the clink of a bottle against glass. Theo tilted his face up, eyes seeking patterns. "You promised stars," Olivia said, her voice quiet, because even hope felt like it should speak gently here. "They will come," he assured her. "They are only waiting for the sky to be ready." They waited with the patience of people who have decided that time belongs to them for a while. Theo told her about his grandfather, who had kept a tiny fishing boat, the color of old lemons, and taught him how to tell what the wind wanted by the feel of it on the forearms. Olivia told him how her grandmother had read aloud at the kitchen table, giving each character a different laugh, how once she had cried over the end of a book and then made pancakes, as if sweetness could help a memory settle. "My father wanted me to keep the boat," Theo said, "but he also wanted me to keep my joy. Sometimes those feel like the same request, and sometimes they argue." "What do you do when they argue?" Olivia asked. "I listen until they resolve it on their own," he said. "It is slower and it works." She was quiet a long moment. "I have been listening to quiet for years," she admitted. "At the shop, the days have their rituals, and people bring their moods, and it is easy to believe nothing needs to change. And yet, he prompted, kind. "And yet I keep arranging the travel section, like a person who is practicing bravery she does not intend to use," she said, laughing at herself softly. "I am good at watching other people go." Theo's shoulder brushed the backrest, a small shift that suggested a tide change only someone tuned to him would notice. What would it look like if you went? Olivia pictured it, closing the shop's door with a sign that promised return rather than absence, buying a ticket that did not frighten her, stepping out of the country of habit and into another that spoke with a similar kindness. She could not see the details. She could feel the weather, "It would look like this," she said, then flushed at her own audacity. Theo did not let her embarrassment stand. "Then let us make sure this becomes a thing you can keep," he said, "not only as a story." The first star appeared then, so bright she felt, illogically, that it must have hummed. Another followed, farther toward the bow. The sky came slowly alive, a map that refused to be rushed. Theo pointed not to impress, merely to share. He taught her the Greek names, rolling the syllables in a way that made them sound older and friendlier. Orion would not appear until later in the season, but Cygnus stretched himself comfortably across the darkness, and Lyra showed shyly to the west. Olivia tried the words and felt her mouth become braver. "Do you have a favorite?" she asked. "The one I am looking at," he said, which made her laugh, and then he added, more serious, "And the one that gets me home when I am tired." They sat until the boat made them aware of sleep. Before they climbed down the companionway, Theo took the small poetry book from where she had tucked it beside the winch and turned it in his hands as if it were something alive. "Read me one," he asked, the request unadorned. Her heart did a small, surprise thing. She cleared her throat and found a short, simple poem about water carrying the color of sky, about oars making temporary wounds that the sea closed as soon as the boat moved on. She stumbled on 2 words, and he supplied them without showing off. When she finished, the quiet that followed felt like a compliment the night had given them. "Good," he said softly. "Your mouth learns quickly. Your voice, too." She took the book back and held it an inch closer to her chest than necessary. "Thank you." Below deck, the others had already succumbed to sleep. Olivia slid into her berth and felt the boat answer with its familiar cradle. Through the porthole, she could see 3 stars, and she imagined they belonged to a constellation that existed only for people who had just remembered something about themselves. She whispered the new words again, letting their shapes be lanterns in her mouth. The days that followed unfurled like a ribbon that had been waiting in a drawer, silk smooth and surprisingly strong. Each morning brought small competencies. Olivia learned to flake the mainsail without tangling it in her thoughts, to coil a line in loops that lay down like obedient cats, to lean when the boat leaned, so balance found them faster. She discovered that she could, in fact, swim in water so clear it forgave her hesitation, and that the sea did not demand grace, only respect and a little courage at the latter. She learned that tomatoes have many ways of tasting like sunshine, and that naps at anchor are not laziness, but gratitude. There were minor errors that became part of the boat's language of patience. Once she let the jib sheet slip through her hands at the wrong moment, and the sail flapped in bruised indignation. Theo reached past her to catch the line, his forearm brushing hers, his voice steady. "No harm," he said. "The sail will forgive you. Give her a better angle next time." Another afternoon, when a friendly gust pushed Eirini more enthusiastically than expected during docking, Olivia's heart climbed into her throat. Theo murmured something to the boat that was not a word in any tongue she knew, and somehow the bow swung with the right compromise and slid into place as if staging a demonstration. On shore, the islands collected themselves in a series of vignettes Olivia could tuck into the pockets of her memory. a courtyard where an old man taught a child to peel oranges in one long ribbon while telling him about the time he had met a monk who could predict rain by the taste of olives. A tiny chapel crammed with candles so earnest that the air seemed made of wax and breath. A bakery that sold honey cookies, still soft from the oven, and refused to take the exact coins, because change should always include kindness. A beach where goats claimed the shade and glared as if billing rent. Between these scenes, Eirini stitched blue to blue, and between Olivia and Theo, a thread of attention grew. Not tight, never tugged, but visible if you knew how to look for it. He asked for her opinion on routes as if she had sailed these waters for years. She asked him about his first voyages and watched the way his face included both pride and humility in the telling. He showed her how to splice a frayed line, and she showed him how to press dried wildflowers between pages so their colors would hold against winter. When she read aloud in the evenings, he listened with a patience that made the poems feel as if they were happening for the first time. When he taught her the names of winds, the miltemi that strode through summers, the shy breaths that skimmed mornings, she kept them like new friends. One dusky hour, after a small climb to a ruined fort that rewarded them with the kind of view that rearranges the furniture of your mind, they lingered while Mara and Inez debated whether to return for dessert or turn the night into a party. Wind moved Olivia's hair in a way that made her aware of her neck. She tucked a strand behind her ear and felt suddenly that Theo was aware of the same small geography. The thought did not fluster her. It warmed and then settled. "Tell me something true you have not told a stranger," he said quietly. Eyes on the place where the sea turned the color of slowly steeping tea. She almost made a joke to give both of them an exit. Then she did not. "When I open the shop in the morning," she said, "I sometimes greet the books out loud. Not all of them, just one shelf. I choose it without thinking. It makes the rest of the day feel like a conversation I have already begun." Theo's smile reached his eyes, in that way that suggested gratitude rather than amusement. "That is a good habit," he said. "The sea and I greet each other too. I do not like to leave without the hello." "What do you say?" "Usually nothing. I stand very still and let my skin remember. Sometimes I say, 'Be gentle with those who forget to bow.'" She laughed, then surprised herself by wanting to cry, a prickle that did not demand tears so much as acknowledgement. "I think I have been forgetting to bow," she admitted, "to anything outside my door." "You are bowing now," he said. On the night the sky decided to be extravagant, they all slept on deck. Theo rummaged and produced an extra blanket for each of them, a magician conjuring comfort, then rigged a small boom tent so dew would be gentle rather than insistent. The harbor had gone almost silent, as if listening for a cue. Overhead, the Milky Way poured itself with the abandon of a story that cannot be told in one sitting. Some sailors name their boats after goddesses, Theo murmured, lying on the combing with his hands behind his head. "It is superstition and devotion in one. Eirini is peace, yes, but she is also a set of choices. Peace does not merely happen." Olivia turned that over as if it were a coin she could spend in the morning. "I have treated peace as a result," she said. "Something you get after you finish being brave. I do not think that is right." "It is often a beginning," he said. or a middle you choose, again and again. Olivia imagined herself back at the bookshop, the bell chiming, the ribbon of routine still safely tucked where she liked it, and she saw, to her surprise, how peace could coexist with new weather. She did not have to dismantle one to taste the other. She could widen. The thought felt like a tide coming in, and not stopping at her ankles. She turned to find Theo watching her, not intently, never like that, but steadily, as if he had placed a lantern somewhere on the path ahead so she would not be nervous about the dark. For a moment, the air between them seemed to carry more than salt. She was aware of his mouth, and of her own, and of 1,000 romance novels that would have put a kiss here with the inevitability of punctuation. Instead, she let her hand rest palm down on the deck between them, close enough to feel the warmth of his shoulder nearby, far enough to keep the world unclaimed. She felt him mirror the gesture, a quiet agreement. Above them, a star fell with the confidence of someone who knew the difference between spectacle and truth. "Make a wish," Mara whispered from the other side of the cockpit. Not asleep after all. Olivia did. She wished for courage that did not need applause. She wished for the precise kind of bravery required to love the life she had and to love the one that might be offered, without pitting them against each other. She wished, specifically and without embarrassment, for more nights like this where the sky seemed to include her. When she slept, she dreamed of open pages that did not close, of water that took her hand, of a man whose voice turned fear into a softer animal, and in the morning when the gulls announced the day with their irreverent commentary, and the coffee smelled like sensible happiness, she felt rested in a way that did not ask her to explain itself. Theo passed her a mug, and, as if continuing a conversation that had not paused, said, "Today we learn a new knot." She grinned at him over the steam. "I am ready." Chapter 4. Storms and Stillness. The days slipped into rhythm. Morning coffee in enamel mugs, sails raised with a groan of canvas, afternoons of practice that turned mistakes into laughter and competence. Olivia's arms carried a new honest ache, and her skin had gathered the freckles. Mia had predicted tiny constellations she traced with mild wonder. She was beginning to believe she might actually belong here, at least for a while. The morning the weather changed, the sea gave them a polite warning. The sky woke with a gauzy veil across the sun, the light diffused and less eager. Theo stood at the stern, scanning the horizon in his way. Eyes narrowed not from suspicion, but from habit. A man in continual conversation with distance. "What is it?" Olivia asked softly, joining him. "A squall," he said simply, pointing toward a darker blur low on the horizon. Not unfriendly, but insistent. "It will pass quickly. We will be ready." The word steadied her, though her stomach still quivered. Theo called the others, explaining with calm clarity, reef the mainsail, stow loose gear, ready rain jackets. Mara's eyes shone with reckless excitement. Inez looked wary, and Olivia felt the peculiar mix of curiosity and dread that lives between the covers of a book when you have not yet turned the page. Theo helped Olivia clip her harness to the jackline that ran along the deck. His fingers brushed hers as he checked the clip. "You will be safe," he said firmly. The boat is built for this. So are we. The wind arrived in playful gusts at first, tugging at hair and jackets, then settled into a push that carried a hint of rain. Theo took the helm, voice rising only enough to be heard. Ease the jib. Reef now. Mara leapt to the lines, Inez following with determination. Olivia braced herself and pulled as directed, her muscles protesting but obeying. The sail shrank obediently, the boat leaning but no longer straining. Then the squall swept over them like an impatient guest. Rain pelted sharp and cold, flattening the sea's surface before whipping it into froth. The boat heeled more deeply, and Olivia's heart thudded against her ribs. For a dizzy moment, she thought of the safety of her bookshop, the still shelves, the quiet certainty of days stacked neatly. She almost wished herself back there. Theo's voice cut through the noise, steady as stone. Look at me, Olivia. She did. His eyes were unwavering, calm even as water streamed from his hair. He smiled, a small, reassuring curl of mouth that somehow made the chaos manageable. You are fine. Feel your feet. Breathe with the boat. She wants you steady, not afraid. Olivia obeyed, planting her feet wide, inhaling with the rhythm of the hull's rise and fall. Her grip on the line loosened just enough to feel like choice rather than desperation. The boat sliced through the waves, not fighting but meeting them, and she realized Theo was right. The sea was not attacking. It was simply existing, and she was part of it. Minutes stretched oddly, both endless and fleeting, and then, as Theo had promised, the squall softened. The rain lightened to mist, the wind sighed into something manageable, and sunlight began to tease its way through the clouds. See, Theo said, as if they had just endured no more than a brisk conversation, unfriendly for a moment, but over quickly. The boat likes to remind us she is alive. Mara whooped with exhilaration, pumping a fist. Inez sagged with relief. Olivia, trembling, laughed breathlessly. I did not disgrace myself entirely, did I? You were excellent, Theo assured her. You listened. That is the most important part. As the sea calmed, Theo guided them toward a secluded cove, a crescent of sand tucked between rocky outcrops, pine trees leaning down as if curious. The water shimmered turquoise, clear enough to see stones resting on the seabed, like coins in a fountain. He dropped anchor, and the boat exhaled into stillness. Time to rest, he declared, and to remember storms pass. They changed out of damp clothes, spreading jackets across the deck to dry. Theo produced a basket from below. Bread, figs, slices of cured meat, wrapped in wax paper, a wedge of cheese fragrant with herbs. They ate sprawled in the cockpit, hair still damp, skin tingling from rain and wind. Olivia's limbs ached pleasantly, exhaustion softened by pride. Mara and Inez soon stretched out on the bow, claiming sun and silence. Theo leaned back at the helm, watching the way the light played across the cove. Olivia sat across from him, legs tucked beneath her, nibbling a fig. Do you always handle storms like that? She asked. Like what? He said, genuinely puzzled, as if they are no more trouble than a forgotten shopping list. He chuckled. Storms have their own language. Panic does not translate. calm does. "I nearly panicked," she admitted. "But you did not. That is the difference." He tilted his head, studying her. "You are braver than you think." The words unsettled her, not because they felt untrue, but because they felt like something she wanted to believe. "I do not think anyone has ever called me brave," she said softly. Theo's expression gentled. "Perhaps no one has seen you in the right wind." Her chest tightened, heat rising in her cheeks. She looked away, out at the turquoise water, where sunlight glittered, giving herself a moment to breathe. "Do you swim?" Theo asked, his tone easy, changing the subject without breaking the thread between them. "A little," she said, clumsily. "Clumsy is still swimming," he replied. "Come, the water is calmer than your bookshop on a Tuesday." She laughed, nerves fluttering. But when he helped her down the ladder, his hand steady at her back, she let go of hesitation. The water closed around her cool and startling, then softened into embrace. She gasped, then laughed, the sound surprising her. Theo swam beside her, not showing off, only keeping pace. They floated on their backs, the cliffs rising like guardians, the sky vast and forgiving above. Olivia let her arms drift wide, the sea cradling her, and for once she did not think about looking foolish. She simply existed, buoyed by water and possibility. Back on board, wrapped in a towel, she sat in the cockpit while Theo brewed coffee on the small stove. The smell was rich, grounding. He handed her a mug, their fingers brushing. She felt warmth bloom that had nothing to do with the drink. "Thank you," she said. And though she meant the coffee, she knew he would hear the wider truth. Theo nodded, a quiet understanding passing between them. The rest of the afternoon unfolded slowly, sun drying their clothes, pages turned in Olivia's book, Theo humming tunelessly while coiling lines. The storm felt distant already. A chapter closed, leaving only the lesson of its brief insistence. That fear can be met, steadied, and transformed. As evening approached, they lit the small lantern and ate dinner on deck. The cliffs reflected the last light, painting the cove in pinks and golds. Mara and Inez dozed early, their laughter fading into sleep. Olivia lingered, her book forgotten beside her, watching the way shadows deepened. Theo sat across from her, elbows resting on the table. "You handled today well," he said again, more quietly now, as though it mattered that she believe it. Olivia smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe I just watched you and decided to borrow your calm." "Then borrow as much as you like," he said, his gaze steady. "It is yours to use." The lantern flickered, the cove hushed, and in that stillness, Olivia felt something open inside her, like a sail finally catching wind. She did not name it. She only let it carry her. Chapter 5. Choosing a Course. The last days of the sailing course gathered themselves like seashells in a pocket, each distinct, each worth turning over in the hand, yet all belonging to the same story. Olivia found herself moving on deck with a grace that had seemed impossible a week ago. Her feet knew where to step. Her hands understood the language of lines. and her eyes sought the horizon without being told. She was still clumsy at times. Her bowlines tended to look like overenthusiastic scribbles, and she once forgot to release a cleat until Theo gently reminded her, but she no longer felt like an interloper. The boat had accepted her. Or perhaps she thought she had finally accepted herself in this place. Theo watched her often, though not in a way that unsettled. His gaze was steady, curious, never pressing. She felt it when she steered, when she trimmed a sail, when she laughed with Mara and Inez over some minor mishap. It was not the gaze of a captain assessing a student. It was something quieter and far more dangerous to her carefully ordered life. The penultimate evening found them anchored near an island with a small harbor glowing under lantern light. The group ate ashore at long tables where fishermen and tourists mingled, the air heavy with grilled sardines, oregano, and laughter. Olivia drank wine and felt her cheeks warm, but the heat inside her had little to do with the drink. Theo sat opposite, telling a story of his grandfather who had once mistaken a shoal of silver fish for treasure until he dipped his nets. His voice wove the table together, but every so often his eyes found hers across the flickering candles. Each glance felt like a tether, invisible yet undeniable. Later, walking back along the quay, Mara and Inez linked arms and drifted ahead, humming tunelessly. Olivia lagged behind, her steps slower, her heart faster. Theo matched her pace. 2 weeks nearly finished, he said softly. I know. She tried to keep her tone even, but the truth weighed heavier than she expected. Time folded itself. It feels both long and too short. Theo nodded. That is how the sea works. She teaches us how to stretch moments until they feel like whole lives. They reached the boat, the Nate calm and clear. Olivia lingered on deck, unwilling to surrender to sleep. The stars were scattered in abundance, so many they looked like spilled flour across black velvet. Theo stood beside her, the silence comfortable. You will return to your bookshop soon, he said. Yes, she whispered. The word felt both safe and sorrowful. And I will return to the sea, he continued. Of course, she said, trying to sound casual. But her throat tightened. That is who you are. Theo was quiet for a long moment. Then, perhaps. But lately I wonder if it is all I am. The admission startled her. She turned to look at him, finding his expression unguarded, lit by starlight. What do you mean? He exhaled, long and thoughtful. I have lived in motion for years, always leaving, always arriving, never stopping long enough to wonder what would happen if I stayed. It has been freedom, yes, but freedom can also become habit, and habit can become prison. Olivia's breath caught. She thought of her own life in Willowbridge, how routine had become both comfort and cage. She whispered, so we are not so different. Their eyes held, the space between them weighted with possibility. Theo reached for her hand, rough and warm, calloused from rope and salt. She let him take it, her pulse stumbling but steadying against his touch. Olivia, he said quietly, these days with you have felt different. I have had countless students, countless crews, But you, he paused, as though seeking the right chart for his confession. You make me see the sea in a new way, quieter, steadier, as if it could be more than movement, as if it could be home. Her chest ached with tenderness and fear. And you make me see the world outside my door, she admitted. You make it feel less like danger, more like story. But Theo, her voice wavered. My life is rooted, yours is not. How can those fit? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently. We do not need to decide tonight. Let us see what tomorrow brings. The next day dawned bright, the air humming with farewell. They sailed their last leg, a gentle passage along a coastline dotted with coves. Mara and Inez joked and sang, their voices carrying across the deck. Olivia and Theo moved together with ease, every action in rhythm. She felt the bittersweet weight of each rope, coiled, each sail furled, small rituals that signaled ending. By afternoon, they docked at the marina, where it had all begun. The bustle of boats returning filled the air, laughter mingling with instructions shouted in half a dozen languages. Theo guided Eirini into her berth with quiet authority, then tied her lines with a precision that seemed almost ceremonial. The crew gathered for a final toast on deck. Mara raised her glass of lemonade high. To Captain Theo, who did not let us drown, and to Olivia, who learned knots without strangling herself. Laughter rippled, and Olivia blushed, smiling. Inez added, to the sea, which forgave our clumsiness, and to whatever stories come next. They clinked glasses, drank, and embraced. Mara and Inez departed with promises of postcards and reunions, their voices fading along the quay. Soon, only Olivia and Theo remained on the boat, the sun sinking low, painting the marina in amber. The silence between them was heavier now, filled with the knowledge that this was the edge of something. Olivia traced the grain of the teak rail with her fingertips. So, she said softly, this is goodbye. Theo studied her, his expression unreadable. Is it? She looked up sharply, startled by the echo of the question he had asked days earlier in a different harbor. His eyes held hers, steady as the horizon. Olivia, he said, voice low, I cannot promise I will stop sailing. The sea is too much a part of me, but I can promise this. I want to try being more than motion. I want to see what happens if I let someone in, if I let something anchor me without taking away my wind. Her breath caught. The ache inside her deepened into something warmer, braver. And I cannot promise I will abandon my bookshop, she said. It is too much of who I am. But I can promise this, I want to try living beyond its walls. I want to see what happens if I allow myself to step into a wider story. They stood in the fading light, two people shaped by different lives, different rhythms. Yet between them was a current stronger than fear. Theo reached for her hand again. This time, Olivia did not hesitate. Their fingers intertwined, a knot tied not by rope, but by choice. Then let us chart a course together, Theo said softly. Not perfect, not certain, just true. Olivia smiled, tears pricking her eyes, but they were gentle tears. Yes, she whispered. Let's. The marina hummed with voices. Gulls cried overhead, and the sea lapped against the hull as if applauding. For Olivia, the world had opened wider than she had ever dared imagine. And for Theo, the horizon no longer meant leaving, it meant beginning. That night, as they sat side by side on Eirini's deck, watching stars scatter across the sky, Olivia felt no need for promises larger than the moment. The sea rocked them softly, and in the hush of the evening, she leaned her head against Theo's shoulder. Sometimes love did not arrive like thunder or spectacle. Sometimes it came like the tide, quiet, patient, inevitable. And as the stars wheeled overhead, Olivia understood she was not just sailing across an ocean. She was sailing into him and into herself. Thank you for listening to Moonlit Romantic. For Olivia, the sea was never about knots or sails. It was about trust. And in Theo's steady laughter, she discovered love could be an anchor and a horizon. If sailing into you drifted gently into your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes love is worth setting sail for. Until next time, sleep softly, dream deeply, and remember, the tides will always change, but the right course is the one you choose together.